The studio lights burned hot as Tim McGraw took his seat, calm and unassuming, a quiet contrast to the charged air that always hovered around the table. The familiar theme music faded, replaced by the low murmur of an audience primed for sparks. Joy Behar leaned forward with a practiced smile, her eyes sharp, fingers tapping lightly against her notes as she welcomed him. Tim nodded politely, offering a brief wave to the crowd, his posture relaxed but attentive, the way someone sits when they know they're being watched but have nothing to prove. The first questions were light, almost friendly. Joy asked about his tour, the fans who followed him from city to city, the way his songs seemed to endure across generations. Tim answered easily, talking about gratitude, about the surreal feeling of hearing thousands of voices sing words he once scribbled in quiet rooms. The audience warmed to him quickly, laughter breaking out at his self-deprecating jokes. For a moment, the segment felt safe, predictable, the kind of celebrity chat that slides by without leaving a mark. Then Joy shifted. Her smile tightened just slightly as she tilted her head and asked about his audience, about who she thought they were and what she implied they believed. The question wasn't overtly hostile, but it carried an edge, a suggestion that his music stood for something more divisive than melody and memory. Tim didn't rush to answer. He inhaled, slow and measured, eyes flicking briefly toward the audience before returning to Joy. The pause itself created tension, the kind that makes a studio suddenly feel smaller. He spoke carefully, choosing words that didn't bite back. He talked about growing up in a small town, about the people who showed up early and stayed late, who found comfort in simple stories set to simple chords. He said music wasn't about telling people what to think, but about reminding them they weren't alone. The room quieted as his voice carried a sincerity that softened the sharpest corners of the question. Even so, Joy pressed on, reframing, pushing, suggesting that neutrality itself was a stance. The exchange grew more focused, less playful. Cameras cut between their faces, catching Joy's raised eyebrow and Tim's steady gaze. She mentioned lyrics, hinting at meanings beyond what he claimed. Tim listened without interrupting, his hands still folded, his expression unchanged. When he responded, he didn't deny complexity, but he rejected the idea that art had to be reduced to slogans. He spoke about writing songs that reflected life as he saw it, messy and contradictory, full of pride and regret at the same time. Joy tossed in a sarcastic aside, the kind that usually earned quick laughs and a ripple of applause. This time, it landed differently. A few chuckles surfaced, then faded. Tim smiled gently, not condescending, not defensive, and answered with grace. He reminded everyone that disagreement didn't require disrespect, that curiosity worked better than contempt. He said conversations stopped being useful when they became performances instead of attempts to understand. His tone never rose, never hardened, but each sentence carried weight. The audience leaned forward, sensing a shift. What had started as a pointed interview was becoming something else, something quieter but more compelling. Tim spoke about unity, not as a buzzword, but as a daily choice. He talked about music as a bridge, fragile but necessary, something you build knowing it might sway but hoping it won't collapse. He said when songs were used to shame instead of connect, they lost their soul. The words hung in the air, unchallenged for a beat longer than usual. Joy tried to interrupt, then stopped herself. She glanced sideways at her co-hosts, then back at Tim. Her next question came slower, less sharp, as if she were recalibrating. Tim answered again, still calm, still grounded, refusing to be pulled into a verbal tug-of-war. He acknowledged that people heard things differently, that interpretations varied, but insisted that listening mattered more than labeling. His answers didn't dodge, they reframed. A hush settled over the studio, broken only by the faint hum of equipment. Even the audience members who came expecting fireworks seemed caught off guard by the restraint. Tim's presence filled the space not with force, but with steadiness. He didn't shut anyone down with volume or insult, he did it by refusing to escalate. Each response felt like a reminder that silence, when chosen, could be louder than argument. As he finished one particularly thoughtful answer, applause began softly, almost hesitant, like people checking whether it was appropriate. Then it grew, spreading row by row, until the sound filled the studio. Joy opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, letting the moment pass. The applause wasn't thunderous yet, but it was sustained, unmistakable, and it marked the turning point. Part 1 ended not with a clash, but with a collective pause, the kind that signals something meaningful has just been said. Part 2 begins in the brief silence after the applause fades, a silence that feels heavier than noise. Joy Behar straightens in her chair, tapping her pen against the table as if to reassert the rhythm of the show. The cameras tighten their focus, catching the subtle shift in her posture and the way Tim McGraw leans back slightly, hands resting on his knees, unbothered. The audience senses it too, the balance has changed, and everyone in the room knows it. Joy clears her throat and tries to steer the conversation back to familiar ground. She frames her next question as a clarification, but the edge is still there, thinner now, wrapped in careful phrasing. She suggests that public figures have a responsibility to speak clearly, to choose sides, to avoid what she calls comfortable ambiguity. Tim listens, nodding once, his eyes steady, his expression open. He waits until she finishes, giving her space, a courtesy that stands out on a show known for quick interruptions. When he responds, his voice is calm but firmer than before, not louder, just more grounded. He says responsibility doesn't always mean declaring allegiance, sometimes it means modeling how to talk without tearing each other apart. He shares a story about a concert where fans from wildly different backgrounds stood shoulder to shoulder, singing the same chorus, unaware or unconcerned about their differences for a few minutes. He explains that those moments matter to him more than scoring points in debates. Joy raises an eyebrow, half smiling, half skeptical. She challenges the idea, suggesting that silence can be interpreted as approval. The studio tenses again, but Tim doesn't retreat. He acknowledges the concern, agreeing that silence can speak volumes, but adds that listening is not silence. He says listening is an action, one that requires patience and humility. His words don't accuse, they invite. The effect is disarming. One of the co-hosts leans in, attempting to lighten the mood with a joke, but it falls short. The gravity of the exchange has pulled everyone into a deeper current. Tim glances briefly at the co-host, smiles politely, then returns his attention to Joy. He continues, explaining that he's seen conversations heal divides when people resist the urge to win. Winning, he says, often feels good in the moment but leaves scars that last longer than applause. Joy flips a page of her notes, the sound crisp in the microphone. She asks about criticism he's faced over the years, about being misunderstood or labeled. This time, the question feels less like a trap and more like genuine curiosity. Tim answers honestly, admitting that it stings, that no one enjoys being reduced to a caricature. But he says he's learned that reacting defensively only feeds the cycle. Growth, he adds, came from staying rooted in why he started making music in the first place. The audience listens intently, some nodding, others sitting perfectly still. Tim's words don't ask for agreement, they ask for reflection. He talks about his family, about lessons passed down quietly rather than lectured. He says those lessons taught him that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up as restraint, as the choice not to escalate when provoked. The room absorbs this, the energy shifting from confrontation to contemplation. Joy attempts one last push, posing a hypothetical designed to corner him into a binary answer. The tactic is familiar, but the timing feels off now. Tim smiles softly, recognizing the move without calling it out. He answers by rejecting the premise altogether, explaining that real life rarely fits into neat hypotheticals. He says people are complex, and forcing them into boxes simplifies problems that demand nuance. His refusal isn't evasive, it's deliberate. A murmur ripples through the audience, followed by another wave of applause, louder this time. Joy pauses, her lips pressed together, then exhales and laughs lightly, acknowledging the response. She concedes that nuance is often lost in television debates, a rare admission that draws surprised smiles from the crowd. Tim nods, appreciative but not triumphant. There's no victory pose, no smug glance toward the camera. As the segment nears its end, the atmosphere is markedly different from how it began. Joy's tone softens further, her questions shorter, less pointed. Tim answers with the same consistency he's shown throughout, never shifting into attack mode. When the host thanks him for joining the show, the words feel sincere, not perfunctory. Tim stands, shaking hands, thanking everyone in return. The applause this time is sustained and unmistakable, echoing against the studio walls. Tim gives a small wave, his smile modest, almost shy, as he exits the stage. The cameras linger for a moment on Joy, who watches him go with a thoughtful expression before turning back to the audience. There's no follow-up jab, no attempt to reframe what just happened. The moment stands on its own. Viewers at home feel it too, the rare satisfaction of witnessing a conversation that didn't devolve into chaos. Social media buzzes almost immediately, clips spreading of Tim's calm responses, his measured pauses, the way he refused to be pulled into hostility. Commentators argue about who won, but many agree on one thing: something different occurred. A quieter form of authority took center stage. Back in the studio, the show moves on, but the energy lingers. Crew members exchange glances, aware they've captured something unexpected. Tim McGraw didn't silence Joy Behar by overpowering her voice. He did it by changing the frequency of the room, by demonstrating that composure can redirect a conversation more effectively than confrontation. When the lights dim and the audience files out, the echo of that calm remains, a reminder that sometimes the strongest statement is simply staying steady.